All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 2021 San Francisco Documentary Film Festival. I'm really excited to be here today to have a conversation with the filmmakers behind Zaho Zay. I'm so excited to welcome Georg and Maiva to this conversation. First, to sort of start off the conversation, the film is sort of operating in two main storylines. You have the storyline of the father that is a bit more, there's the fiction part that's more cinematic in some ways, and then the scenes with the people who are incarcerated in the men and women's prison throughout the film. And so I first just wanted to hear from you all about how did you decide that that's the form that the film would take, and how you wanted to sort of shift between genres throughout the film.
Georg, I let you start. Yeah.
Okay, I start. So the film was a bit very free in the sense, in the form that how we approached it, it was a bit a film a bit by chance, and then it was very, very constructed. By chance, I mean that we were in fact researching for an entirely different film when we arrived in Madagascar, for a film that Maiba wanted to shoot. And on the run, we decided that it would be a pity if we would not already start filming, because of where we ended up, of our driver, who is Maiva's uncle and who became our main actor, and of everything that we would lose if we wouldn't already start filming. The surprising thing is that we had this idea of a killer in our mind that would kind of like discover the island or would roam around the island. And the whole opportunity to actually work inside a prison in Madagascar came later. And that's when we had to really shape the story so that these two very different visual and social realities could come together. So that's a bit how we put these things together. It was not we didn't arrive there with this would be the final form when we arrived in Madagascar, I would say.
Yes, and the first part of the shooting then started very freely because we had this very good actor that was my uncle that we didn't expect to have, and we were also location scouting in crazy deserts in Madagascar, where we would really remember these American westerns and a lot of gangster imagery. And with him, it was really the perfect set, but we didn't have really a story yet. So we started to follow him everywhere. And after that, we thought we had a lot of very good material. We started to shape a costume, a style, the dice, and so on, but it was not a completed story. And so when we had a year after the opportunity to work in the prison, we thought maybe this amazing material we have about a free man that is a free murderer in the countryside, maybe it could be a very interesting balance with this seclusion of a prison. So we started to think of the script and we shaped the story just before to go to the prison accordingly to what we already had as a paradoxical imagery.
Yeah, that really that sort of paradoxical imagery really comes throughout the film. And Maiva, I think you may be frozen.
Yes.
But we can still hear you. So
wait, maybe I can stop the video and start it again.
Yeah.
I doesn't want to start again.
Oh no.
What? Video parameters, I don't know why, but it's a complete bug here on my computer. I think you will need to
Okay, so I think that really moves really well into sort of what I was wondering about, my second question about the writing of the film, particularly the the narration that happens throughout the film that's by a writer that you all worked with. And I'm really curious because there's a lot that it's exploring about the relationship between the father character, the killer character that you all have, but also the relationship that they have to Madagascar itself and who's protected in the country, how people experience and live in the country. And so I'm curious to hear from you all about how you worked with him and how that process got started, and sort of did he watch the film and see a cut of the film and then write, or how did that process sort of work? Because I think his writing really keeps those two threads really working together.
Absolutely, yes. Yes, well, first of all, what was interesting in the process is like we found the writer after having shot in the prison, but in the prison we already knew that we didn't know enough about the penitentiary system and also the political situation in Madagascar to really go for a full documentary with talks, and we didn't want to make any judgment on what we saw. So straight away, we decided that the camera would be the POV of an imaginary character that could take off those pictures from the idea of objectivity, you see. And so when we started to look for a writer who would do the voiceover, we had really the luck to find Jean-Luc, which is a Malagasy writer. He knew very much the island. He could embody a Malagasy person, but also in the years 2002, I think, during this social and political crisis in Madagascar, his father, who was a historian, was in prison in one of those Malagasy prisons as a political prisoner. And so he really went through the whole process of having his father in this prison, going to Madagascar, trying to save him, to sneak in medication in the prison. And he really had a horrible, a very difficult experience of the situation, but also he could have a very broad vision of how it works, how the surveillance is done, how the medication is done, what are the major problems of those prisoners. So this is really something that could give us the possibility to interpret what we saw, add a little side of political input with somebody that knew what he was talking about. And his father died in the meantime, so he also had, like us, a relationship with a distant father. So really the text, he was the perfect one to write a text that would really make things work in the narration.
Maybe I should add that, so Maeva hasn't been back to Madagascar. I mean, she was there once as a child, and then we decided to go. Actually, I was supposed to be the producer for her, for another feature film of hers that is set in Madagascar. And Maeva has, of course, an extensive family on the island. So I think we had a family reunion, and there were like 300 people there. So it's quite an extensive family that Maeva has. And but we are both, let's say, of course, not Malagasy. So we had a very much an outsider perspective. So we were looking in the writer really for someone who we would feel safe with, who could really write from a more inside perspective of this island. And we were pitching actually Jean-Luc the story, because the story we had a bit in our mind, which was that there is a female prison guard who imagines whose father disappeared when she was a child, and she imagines that he becomes this kind of like a mythical criminal, and that she would wait for him to arrive in his prison. So that's what we said to Jean-Luc, that this was a bit the story, and we wanted the story to be quite universal in a way, so that we could relate to it, or that basically anyone potentially can relate to it, as a very universal family story. That was a bit, I think, some of the ideas that we told him. And then the way we worked was that there was a rough cut, to which Jean-Luc wrote a quite extensive text. And Then the actual real editing, so to speak, started with also our editor, Barbara Bossuet, who was also a gift that we had her, because it was really then a lot of work to shorten the text and to bring it in the right harmony and in the right melody so that it would work both visually but also on this narrative layer. So that's a bit how it went, I would say.
Yeah, I think the point that you just made about it feeling really universal, I think that really does come through in terms of like thinking about your relationship with a parent. Not all of us have parents who are murderers, but there's clearly the question of like, how do you relate to someone who you don't know, but you know you came from, which I think kind of plays really well into the next question I had. That's really for you, Maeva, and thinking about, you know, you're from Madagascar, but you didn't necessarily grow up there. And I'm very curious to hear from you about when you were thinking about the film, how you approached it as someone who is Malagasy, but maybe didn't necessarily grow up there, and what it was like for you filming there and how that informed maybe the editing process and things like that for the film.
Yes, I think it's really a kind of um, piece of work, the film in itself, that is really a typical product from the second generation immigration outside of a country. And so the film is very, very much tainted with that, in the sense that it can really embody the voice of the one that are away, in the sense that it was like when we arrived on the island at the first time, it was really for me also a way to discover the country of my father and to question, where is my father and where am I in this country, and feeling really like a stranger somehow, and at the same time knowing that some things of my roots are there and not in Europe. So I think it really translated inside the fact that every Malagasy person, every Malagasy man that I would see would be potentially my father when he was on the island, or any boy would become my father when he was a kid, which is something that I didn't know about. And it started to transform into this weird nostalgia, not of my own childhood, but of the childhood of my father, which is something that you see more precisely in this moment of the film with the little boy. And so I think it translates into something that can be a bit dreamy, like fairy tale of a child. But I like this duality it has also about the scream of where are you, who were you, what are you, and what am I through you. So this prison guard that really screams at every male she sees around, because maybe it should be the father, but it's not the father. It's really, to me, more like the sign of, yeah, the distress you can and the feeling of loss you can be with when you are in your country of adoption, and knowing not where you are from, and even when you are coming back to your roots, you still feel a stranger. And there is this kind of, unbalanced emotional mood that we really wanted to create it, and that I'm happy to have the possibility to crystallize there in this film. But it's really a scream of roots. I know who I am, and at the same time I don't know, and it's something I will have to accept that will never change somehow.
Yeah, and I feel like that the dreamlike aspect that you were talking about, and sort of the what is the way I'm trying to phrase this, the beauty of exploring a place that like you're from through the camera, I think is something that very clearly comes throughout the film. And I think you mentioned that it's dreamlike is actually the way that I phrased my question about the cinematography, is because it felt so dreamlike, but also had these moments of very clear isolation. And so I wanted to hear from both of you, especially Georg, because you did the cinematography, kind of how did you approach that? And especially because I feel like the moments with the father, there are shots where he's so clearly isolated in the frame, or there's a lot of space in the frame with him. And so I just wanted to hear, both of you can talk about that, but especially from you, Georg.
So, I mean, I can say that, I mean, in this camera work, I also kind of returned to my roots in a very different way, because I started out of studying cinematography at film school and directing at the same time. But I didn't do camera for quite a long time on any of my films. So it was quite revelatory for me to do it again. And I felt also very liberated somehow, because people are extremely natural in front of the camera in Madagascar, because there isn't any cinema. There's also not even so much TV. So people have a very genuine encounter with you and the camera. So that was extremely and charming in a way, because you rarely have this anywhere in the world anymore, where you can come with the camera and life unfolds itself almost without shyness in front of you. So I think that gave me a lot of confidence to start exploring. And then it was intuitively, but also, of course, Maiwa and me, we were discussing constantly on our trip what we were aiming for. And I think it was very organic somehow, this camera work. There were never so much questions on how and why. It felt, in a way, it was a road movie for us, because we were driving so much. And so it was a bit this kind of, you arrive somewhere and you need to orient yourself, and the camera is a very great tool to orient yourself. And of course, I mean, the story with the father and the daughter, that was the line, the thread we were following. So if we would isolate the father figure, then it would be because it's a imaginary father figure, so to speak. So that was a bit, I think, I don't know, my experience more than anything else when I was doing the camera work.
But I have to say, Georg is really were coming a lot from documentary. He had been filming already feature films on the island of Ingmar Bergman in Sweden. And so I knew already that he had a very great mastering of how to film landscape. So as soon as we were in this Malagasy landscape, it's not so easy to film, because you are overwhelmed by the beauty of everything. And very often you can end filming anything. And so, but this capacity of focus of Georg was really great. And I think one of the magical points is that the landscape was beautiful, but Georg was really able to frame in staying very focused. And this natural behavior of people in this landscape in the camera made it straight away looking like very natural and fictional somehow. So we were shooting in a documentary way. And at the end, the pictures we had were screaming for fiction, because of this scarf that we decided that the character would wear, and he would straight away wear it, and it looked like a pure Western. And so we were really like, it was a process of discovering through what we could film, what film it would be at the end, but we needed directly to adapt to the material, and it was really tracing something already very specific.
Yeah, I think that really also plays really well into the next question I had in thinking about access in the prison and the way that you all film there. I also really love in particular that you named the incarcerated people at the end, and that they're a part of your credits. That really gives them a space and an acknowledgement. And so I'm curious, because here in the US, I feel like the conditions of prisons are really purposefully obscured from people. But your film really puts at least what it looks like to be in a Malagasy prison. And I'm curious to hear about how you all navigated access there and filming with them, and sort of how that experience was in particular.
Yes, so in fact, we were granted access to the prison because my uncle at that time was working for an NGO that was working for human rights inside this very prison. So he saw us with Georg with the camera starting to film here and there, and he thought, okay, you know what? There is at the moment some issues with Amnesty International. It's very difficult to have imagery from the prison, and because my NGO is there, maybe you could do a little reportage documentary about us, and like that we would have something to promote a bit what we do. And so we accepted, but we asked also, look, we are making now a feature film here and we would like to be authorized to collect also material for our own film in that case. So this was granted. And so our real luck is that then we arrived in the prison and we were presented to the prisoners as being working for this NGO and being working also in film. And they had the right condition, I think, to feel safe with us because we were just there to show what is going wrong, what is okay. And so they were really actually extremely happy to have us. And on the contrary, of course, to the US, the system in the prison is very different. Everybody is mixed, but it's also a prison where there is a crazy, it's a situation of no violence that is very, very typical to the Malagasy culture. And so there, for the real murderers or the political prisoners, there is another prison. But in here, it was really like the guy that stole an orange, the guy that happened to be in the street when a rich person didn't want him to be there and just said, okay, just take this guy. So the people we were surrounded with were really harmless. And we ended up in a prison with nobody to protect us. And all those prisoners with blades to cut the hairs and so on, who would never, ever think of any violence. So that was really a luck for us because we could approach them like that. And also we realized that they are so forgotten in this island and in this judiciary system that they were really, really happy to be seen for the first time and to be addressed, to be touched, and even to shake their hands or put an eye on them was a gift that we would offer. So they were very, very soon, I mean, some didn't want to be filmed and shied away on the place, and we completely respected it. But some other wanted to show, look, I'm able, you know, I'm a prisoner, but I have my dignity. I'm able to play music. I'm able to sing. I'm able to organize a concert for you. What do you want? How do you? We even found some people that knew several languages. And so they were very, very collaborative. And we arrived there also a little bit as the show of the day because it's so all the time the same routine, and for once they have some kind of possibility to make a little theater, to play some roles, to also show what was going wrong. So it was an incredible circumstance that permitted us this film. We were really lucky.
But I would not say that Madagascar per se would be so interested in broadcasting these images. So, I mean, we made a little reportage for the NGO. And this prison, you need to know, is the 5-star prison of the island. So we saw some imagery from Amnesty International that shows really very even harsher circumstances. I think what was interesting is, of course, I mean, you arrive in a place like this. We spent there, I think, 2 weeks. You don't really know how are the rules. You don't really know how is the hierarchy. And so as in any documentary, you start to adapt by adapting to the daily routine. That means you arrive every day at this roll call and you go home when they need to go back inside. And so you, little by little, you understand a bit more, and little by little, you're introduced by the prisoners to their reality. And I think it was quite a very collaborative process. And it was also interesting because it was very different between the male part of the prison and the female part of the prison, because it was very good to see that the female part, there are way fewer prisoners. and they immediately had a committee, and they wanted things from us before they would say you can film. So they wanted some medication, they wanted some things for the babies, they wanted some food and things like that. So it was, I mean, it seemed to be way better organized in the female part in some ways than in the male part. I don't know. I think, yeah, I think it's still a big mystery to me, the Malagasy prison system, even though I've been in one of them, but I haven't seen most of them. So I think, coming back to your question, I think there is a big mystery around it, because we hardly see any imagery actually from these prisons.
And we filmed, but not everything. I mean, we tried, I mean, we could not film everything. First of all, we could not be there during night, for example. And also, I mean, the film is very, it shows without saying, you know, you see that there is babies in the prison, which is the first questions, but actually the women enter the prison not being pregnant yet. So there is a lot of questions about how that baby happened to be conceived, and there were also, we couldn't film so much what was happening with the prison guards. So it's really, we are just putting fragments of reality that are able to open to a broader picture, but you need to really take the pictures and think for yourself, okay, but what does it mean, this soup every day, and the state of their skin, and these babies being there. And it's very, it's there also to show that there is a dark side of it. There is a place we cannot go, even us.
Yeah, absolutely. And I thought about that as I was watching, like, what are the bits of things that we don't get to see because all of the shots were in the daytime. But to sort of, my last question, to sort of go on the flip side of that, in terms of, there are these moments of like celebration and joy and kind of music throughout, even sort of the funeral, having this still sort of celebratory experience, and like dancing with the people who have passed away, and those moments of like the silk weavers. And so that feels sort of like depicting everyday scenes of things that happen in Madagascar, at least in the places where you filmed. And so I just wanted to hear from you all about filming those moments and how you sort of weaved those into the film, because I think they do sort of provide a moment of lightness in the sort of back and forth of the sort of heavier parts of the film.
I guess I mean, I would say that 90% of the places we went to were in some way connected to Maeva's family. So we were collecting a lot of things from her relatives. Let's say the funeral, I mean, it's not necessarily a funeral, it's specific Malagasy ritual. This we were introduced to also by the family. I mean, we knew about it, but we were given access because it was friends of the family. And I mean, this, as I said, it's kind of a road movie approach that we had. So we were letting ourselves a bit led also to things that we were given access to. And these were especially moments that, of course, when we captured them, we were mesmerized by them, and we knew we wanted to include them. And I mean, there are the silk weavers, for instance, it's way more fragile in a way, the imagery and what it means. Or there, I would also point out, I think the sacrifice of the Cebu in this, it's in a more mountainous village in Madagascar. So these were all places that we were, either we heard about it before and we wanted to see it, or some people pointed it out to us, and we then, you know, spent our interest on it. We went there, we spent some time there, and that's a bit also where we are between this documentary and fiction, where it really leaps over, because sometimes you would bring our protagonist slash actor to these scenes that we then capture in a very documentary way of making films somehow.
Yes, but at the same time, it's like we spent like 2-3 years shooting this film on the island, discovering it at the same time, and somehow the way it's constructed, it's a bit a portrait of the island. You know, the name is Zaho Zay, which means it's me. It's a portrait. And actually, for example, you see very harsh realities and you see also a lot of music. And this is actually what we could observe of the personality of the island, because there were constantly very raw, difficult aspects of jail, poverty, sometimes those sacrifices that can be very difficult to see. And at the same time, music is really part of the island identity. People play music every day. At every meal, they would sing, every birthday, every celebration. And even when we would enter the harshest parts of the island, like the prison, one of the first things that they did in the male part of the prison is to make music competition for us, you know, like who is the best guitarist. And I can show you a bit of these songs of the shepherds. Me, it's the song that we hear in town. And everywhere you go in Madagascar, you hear music and you have celebrations. So it was somehow we did let ourselves be impregnated by these imageries and feelings, and what goes out of it is this extreme poverty and harshness of life, and at the same time this very big dignity and traditional roots that are never destroyed somehow. And so the film is in balance in those two things, but I think anybody that goes to Madagascar and really tries to starts to explore would be confronted by these two antagonistic elements that you find in the film. It's like a 3 years portrait of the island somehow.
Yeah, well, it's a really beautiful portrait that I'm so glad that we have the opportunity to showcase at SF Doc Fest. Do y'all have anything else that you want to say about the film as we end the Q&A, or things that you want to make sure the audience takes away?
Well, I could talk a little bit about this lullaby that we use a lot in the film. It's a very interesting thing, and I'm not always sure it's easy to grasp it at the first time you see the film. So maybe I can tell about it. It's a very interesting lullaby. It's a lullaby that is saying, little bird, take my baby that is crying and fly away high in the sky with it. And when it calms down, bring it back to me. And actually in the film, we use three different versions of this lullaby. Before colonization, it was a lullaby that was singing to the bird for the kid. And during colonization, this bird became white bird coming from afar, take my baby away and make it feel better, and then give it back to me. So we have these two first layers. And what we did at the end of the film is that we add a third, a bit more sad layer, where the song says, white bird from afar, take my baby. Oh, the bird took the baby but never brought its childhood back. So it's a kind of 3-layer play that we had in the film. So it's a significant point of the film, yeah, and also musical. So.
Mm-hmm. Georg, do you have anything else you want to say as we wrap things up?
Don't go kill people after throwing the dice.
I think that's excellent advice. Thank you both so much for sharing the film, for your time here today.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, I'm so glad to have you, and so glad that we got to talk about the film. And I hope everyone watching that you watch the film and then share about the film with other people. It'll be available throughout the festival. So thank you all again. Have a great day.
Thank
Bye.
you.